So, Julie, first off, bring us up to speed on all of the things, and it feels like they're happening as we speak, that the administration is doing to try to shut off the border, to try to close it entirely, but then also to begin the process of rounding people up and sending them home.
Yeah, Katie, from where we sit right now, and look, a lot could change in the days and weeks to come, but from where we sit right now, I would say the biggest changes have been at the border, cutting off asylum really entirely. We've been speaking with people at the border who say that now migrants can't even present themselves at legal ports of entry to claim asylum. They're turned back. Of course, he turned off the CBP One app, so people who had appointments to claim asylum here could no longer get through. And he's continuing what Biden started, where people really cannot claim asylum if they cross between ports of entry and encounter Border Patrol. That is a fundamental change and really could end up taking them to court. As we know, they're already being challenged by the ACLU here in D.C. because they're arguing that the United States is really in violation of an obligation to uphold asylum as an international right. As far as what's happening on the interior, not as much as we thought so far. A lot of the arrests that you've seen are part of normal operations, routine operations is what I've been told from sources at ICE. That a lot of these people were already on their list. I've been out on arrests like that just this summer. I was with ICE as they arrested people who were wanted for murder in their home countries. Gabe Gutierrez just did a similar ride-along with ICE in Boston. We're going to see a lot of pictures, Katie, and I want everyone to be prepared to see these arrests be made far more public than we'd seen in the past. But right now, the numbers aren't reflecting anything quite above average. For example, in September, the number of people who ICE arrested every day was at 282. We understand from Tom Homan, the border czar, that first 24 hours they arrested 308. Not a huge jump. That could change, though, with the way you see Stephen Miller and others talking about using other law enforcement agencies and the military to go do more arrests. But in the end, ICE is in a $230 million budget shortfall, even to do their current operations. So it looks like right now the biggest impact is on the border.
Can the military arrest people? Do they have that authority, Lisa?
Not unless you call this an invasion, which many people on the Trump side would say it is. From a legal perspective, I think there's a very healthy, if not strong argument that it is not. So the use of the military here to get involved in the detention or even deportation of undocumented immigrants is not only unprecedented, Katie, but something that's without legal authority as far as I'm understanding.
I'm curious how exactly they can get this done. I mean, they're talking a big game about wanting to take people and get them out of the country. But functionally speaking, they've got to send them somewhere. And not all countries are going to accept the people who have left. And the countries that are going to accept them, like places like Mexico and Guatemala, who are trying to get ready for it, can only accept so many at one time. Dara, I know you study this. Walk me through just the hurdles that Donald Trump's going to be facing, practically speaking.
Right. So we've identified through this conversation the three kind of big things the government has to do and to take someone who's currently living in the U.S. and take them to the point where they can say they're deported. They have to arrest them. They have to have somewhere to hold them in government custody until such time as they can deport them. And they have to deport them. They have to have the seat on the plane, and they have to have a country that will accept them. And really, those deportation flights are negotiated not quite on a flight-by-flight basis, but it's very close. So many of the people who the Trump administration has said are already in the United States and have final orders of deportation, the reason those haven't been executed yet is because their home country will not take any flights from the U.S. or will take only very limited flights from the U.S., either for diplomatic reasons or because they just don't have the capacity to take that many deportees. So this is going to be a diplomatic effort as much as anything. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced that his first trip is going to be to many Central American and Caribbean countries, and presumably on the agenda there is going to be trying to get them to take more deportees from their own country and potentially from other countries as well. But the question of what can be done, everything kind of backs up from there. The fewer people you can deport, the more people you have to be holding in these temporary facilities that are extremely expensive to maintain, and the fewer people ultimately you can arrest who are in the community without running out of money.
I'm assuming that there are some smaller countries who want to have good relationships with the United States who will say, yes, we're going to take some people. We can take some foreigners as well that aren't our countries, maybe not their original home. But places like Mexico, I mean, they have interesting leverage here as well, because Mexico is really the last stop. And if this administration, the United States, wants to really shut things off at the border, really close down crossings, they need the willing cooperation of Mexico. But Mexico also has a trade deal that they want to be treated fairly and maybe better by Donald Trump. So what sort of leverage might the Mexican president have?
In 2019, we were actually in a very similar situation with the Trump administration threatening very, very punitive tariffs on Mexico throughout the spring. And then in early summer, announcing a deal with then Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador for Mexico to take people who had asylum hearings set in the U.S. to have them waiting, the Remain in Mexico policy. That had been in place before, but it had been much more limited. It became much more widespread. That was a massive turning point in terms of the willingness of the Mexican government to just kind of accept the terms as dictated to them by the U.S. If the U.S. is able to do something like that, if they're able to get Mexico back to a similar posture, either in letting people stay temporarily while they nominally have asylum hearings or in accepting deportees, that's huge. But, right, if Mexico decides that they are going to take a stand on that issue and force concessions on trade, on energy, on any of the other issues in which there might be Mexican interests, then we have a much more interesting situation. And the current president has said that she will accept deportees for humanitarian reasons, but then turned around and said that she would not accept people under the Remain in Mexico program. So it's not at all clear where things actually stand.
It seems like there's a negotiation here, that she does have some power of her own. How much there's also funding involved here. I mean, the United States helps fund humanitarian projects, especially in South and Latin America. How much money do they need? Does it behoove this administration to continue to try and help some of these economies, some of these governments, in order to make it less desirable for people to come here? They're fleeing violence, yes. They have credible asylum claims, but they're also fleeing poverty and opportunity, lack of opportunity in their home countries. So if it's not a better situation down there, there's going to be a whole lot of people who might just turn around and try to come back again.
This has been the argument for some time, and it's actually why Vice President Joe Biden, way back in the day, made a big effort of expanding development aid to the countries that were at that point sending the most migrants to the U.S., which then President Donald Trump then clawed back during his first term. The problem with what's called the kind of root causes argument, as you've just laid it out politically, is that it takes a really long time for that to come to fruition. So, like, the numbers at the border aren't going to go down next month, which makes politicians a little bit leery to accept it. But there is an alternative way of thinking about it, which is that the U.S. is by no means the only rich country in the hemisphere. There are other places that have a whole lot of refugees. The Venezuelan refugee crisis has been an absolutely hemisphere-wide problem, and that are doing some a better job than others of, integrating those refugees into their economy, of giving them temporary or semi-permanent legal status. There is an argument to be made for a development agenda that focuses on allowing people to be at home where they are. If you're really that interested in deterring people from coming to the U.S., giving them other alternatives other than a binary choice between staying at home and coming here.
Oh, Dara, I'm so happy we had you today. Thank you so much for being here, and please do come back on this story. Julie, thank you as well. Julia Ainsley, excuse me. And Lisa, I presume the case against the 14th Amendment that Donald Trump wants to banish or ban birthright citizenship, I assume now they're going to appeal that and it's going to go up to the Supreme Court. They will. I mean, before we even get to the Supreme Court, Katie, remember that there are cases pending in other districts in the country. Today's order, while it enjoins that EO, or the executive order, for 14 days nationwide, that gives the administration not only time to appeal, but it also gives other courts around the country time to make their own decisions about the applicability of the ban and its constitutionality.